Hey there, amazing teachers! Have you ever wondered what the perfect balance between comprehensible input and output really is? I have. Exactly, Fizz. And how can you be sure that your students are getting just the right mix to truly thrive in their language learning journey? Good question. I get it's like making a perfect smoothie. Too much of one thing, and it's just not right. Absolutely. And most importantly, how can you seamlessly incorporate both input and output into your lessons without overwhelming yourself or your students? Can you tell us, Scott? I need to know. Fizz, you're in luck. If these questions have been on your mind, you're in the right place. In this video, we're going to dive deep into these critical aspects of language teaching. Deep dive? Like into a hole of knowledge? Exactly, Fizz. First, we'll uncover the ideal balance between input and output. No more guessing or trial and error. No more guessing? Sounds like a plan. Then I'll share practical strategies that you can start using right away to ensure your students are not only receiving enough input, but also producing meaningful output that accelerates their learning. Oh, I love practical. Give me all the tips. And as a bonus, I'll show you how to easily assess whether your current approach is hitting the mark or if there's room for improvement. Donuts tits? That just keeps getting better. But that's not all. Stick with me because throughout this video, I'll be dropping some game-changing tips that'll make balancing input and output not just achievable, but effortless. Effortless? That's my favorite kind of effort. By the end, you'll have a clear, actionable plan to transform your teaching and boost your students' success. Let's get started. I'm ready to learn and have some fun. Let's do it, Fizz. And you too, let's dive in together. Imagine walking into a classroom where students are effortlessly soaking up the language like sponges, engaging in student conversations that seem natural and fluent. What's the secret sauce behind this magical classroom? It's all about mastering the balance between comprehensible input and output. But wait, what exactly are these terms and why are they a dynamic duo of language acquisition? Hold on, because we're about to dive into what makes them so powerful. Picture this. You're trying to learn a new language by listening to native speakers or reading a book in the language. At first, it feels like deciphering a code, right? That's where comprehensible input comes into play. This is the kind of language you can understand, even if you don't catch every single word. Think of it as receiving just enough clues to piece the meaning together. It's the foundation, the fertile soil where your language skills start to grow. But here's the twist. Just soaking in all that input isn't enough. You can't truly claim a language until you start using it, and that's where output steps onto the stage. So what's output? It's not just about repeating words or memorizing phrases. It's about actively using the language to express yourself, whether you're speaking, writing, or even just thinking in the language. Output is where you take all that input and transform it into something uniquely yours. It's the practice that makes the knowledge stick, the bridge that connects what you've learned to real-world communication. But here's the kicker. Without the right balance between input and output, you risk creating a one-way street, where either you're passively consuming language or you're trying to produce it without enough fuel. And that's exactly why understanding comprehensible input and output is so crucial. Striking the right balance is like finding the sweet spot between language learning, a place where your students are not just absorbing the language, but are also confidently using it. In the rest of this video, we'll explore how to create that balance, making sure that your students are equipped not just to understand the language, but to live it, speak it, and truly own it. Ready to make that happen? Let's dive into how you can bring this dynamic duo into perfect harmony in your classroom. You've probably heard the saying, too much of a good thing can be bad, right? Well, that's especially true when it comes to balancing input and output in language learning. Imagine a seesaw. One side is input, the other is output. If you tip too far to one side, the whole thing crashes down. But finding that perfect balance, that's where the magic happens. It's the secret sauce that makes your students not just understand the language, but truly communicate and connect with it. So how do you strike that balance? Well, here's where the 80-20 rule comes in. Imagine spending 80% of your time soaking in the language, listening, reading, observing, letting your brain marinate in all those juicy bits of comprehensible input. Then, the remaining 20%, that's when you bring it all to life. This is where your students get to play with the language, experiment, and make it their own through speaking and writing. It's like filling a cup, input, before you can pour from it, output. The more you fill, the more you can pour out, right? But here's the twist. The balance isn't always set in stone. Depending on where your students are in their language journey, the seesaw might need a little bit of adjusting. Beginners, they'll benefit from more input to build that foundational understanding. Think of it like priming a pump before the water flows. But as they gain confidence and skill, you can start shifting more weight towards output, giving them more opportunities to use what they've learned in real conversations and written expressions. The beauty of this balance is that it's flexible. It's about tuning into your students' needs and adjusting as they grow. Maybe today it's 80-20, but as your students advance, you might find 70-30 or even 60-40 works better. The key is to keep the seesaw moving, constantly finding that sweet spot where the input fuels the output, and output reinforces the input. And when you hit that perfect mix, that's when your classroom truly comes alive with students who aren't just learning the language, they're living it. Ready to find that balance in your own teaching? Let's get into how you can make it work. You walk into your classroom and there's an energy in the air. Students are engaged, eager, and actually excited about language learning. Sounds like a dream, right? But what if I told you it's totally achievable with the right mix of activities that balance both input and output? The trick is in the design of your lessons, where each part builds on the other, creating a seamless flow of learning that feels natural and, most importantly, fun. Let's start with input. Imagine kicking off your lesson with a captivating story, one that's packed with rich, comprehensible input. Stories are like the secret weapon of language teaching because they draw students in, giving them context, emotion, and meaning all wrapped up in a narrative they can follow. As your students listen, they're not just hearing words, they're seeing scenes, feeling emotions, and understanding concepts, without even realizing they're learning. And the best part? They're soaking up vocabulary, grammar structures, and cultural nuances effortlessly. But here's where the real magic happens. You take that story and you flip it out into output. Now it's their turn to talk, to write, to use the language they've just absorbed. Structured conversation activities work wonders here. Let's say you ask students to retell the story in their own words, or better yet, create a dialogue between characters. They're not just parroting back information. They're actually using the language, piecing it together in a way that makes sense to them. It's like flexing a muscle. The more they use it, the stronger it gets. And here's a pro tip. Mix it up. Alternate between listening exercises and speaking opportunities within a single class period. For example, after your storytelling session, shift gears to a quick listening activity, maybe a short podcast or a song that ties into the story's theme. Then immediately follow up with a speaking or writing task related to what they've just heard. This keeps the lesson dynamic and ensures that input and output are working hand in hand, reinforcing each other in real time. The beauty of these strategies is that they're flexible and adaptable to any classroom setting. Whether you're teaching beginners or advanced learners, you can tweak these activities to fit the needs of your students. And the payoff? A classroom where the language learning is vibrant, interactive, and dare I say, a lot of fun. So you've crafted this beautifully balanced lesson plan that mixes input and output like a perfectly blended smoothie. But how do you know it's hitting the mark? How can you be sure that your students are soaking up just the right amount of input and dishing out enough output to really cement their learning? Here's where the art of assessment comes into play. Because let's be honest, even the best plans need a reality check to make sure they're working. Let's start with the power of observation. It might sound simple, but keeping an eagle eye on students during lessons can reveal so much. Are they actively listening during the input activities? Are they leaning in, nodding along, and showing signs of understanding? And when it's time for output, are they jumping in with enthusiasm or hesitating like they're stepping into cold water? These little cues can tell you a lot about whether they're getting the balance they need. Think of it as taking the pulse of your classroom. It's a quick check to see if everyone's on the same page. But don't just rely on what you see. Create feedback loops that give you direct insight into how your students are feeling. Simple exit tickets can work wonders here. At the end of a lesson, ask them to jot down what they understood best and where they felt lost. Or throw in a quick reflective question like, which part of today's lesson did you find most challenging? This not only gives you a window into their learning experience, but also empowers students to reflect on their own progress. It's like a two-way mirror. What they share helps you adjust your teaching, and then they get to see their own growth more clearly. And here's the game changer. Quick formative assessments. These are your secret weapon for gauging whether your students are getting enough of both input and output. Think along the lines of mini quizzes, 1-minute papers, or even a quick parent share, where students recap what they've learned. These aren't about grading, they're about gathering data on how well the information is sticking. If you notice a pattern, say students acing the input questions but struggling with output tasks, it's a sign that you might need to tweak the balance in your next lesson. By combining observation, feedback loops, and formative assessments, you're not just teaching, you're continuously tuning the learning experience to meet your students' needs. It's like being a DJ, mixing the perfect track that keeps everyone in the groove, adjusting the tempo to make sure the energy stays high and the learning keeps flowing. Hey there, amazing teachers! Are you looking for a way to build stronger relationships with your students and take your classroom management to the next level? Oh, I know what they need, Scott. That's right, Fizz. We've got something special just for you. Our Dynamic Discipline course. It's a 10-part mini course packed with strategies to help you build real connections with your students and manage your classroom like a pro all year long. And the best part, you can get started right now. Exactly. Head over to mm.us/discipline and join us. Let's make this your best teaching year yet. Don't wait. Your students will thank you. See you in the course and get ready to transform your classroom. Imagine walking into a classroom where each student learns differently. One is glued to visuals on the board, another seems to soak up every word you say, and a third just can't sit still, always needing to move or touch something to grasp a concept. Sounds like a juggling act, right? But here's the secret. When it comes to balancing input and output in the language learning, one size definitely does not fit all. The real trick is knowing how to adjust that balance for different learning styles so that everyone, no matter how they learn best, is getting the most out of your lessons. Now let's talk about those visual learners first. These students live for images, diagrams, and anything that paints a picture of the concept you're teaching. For them, input might look like watching a story unfold through a series of pictures or following along with a video that's rich in visual cues. But how do they output? Think mind maps, drawing scenes from the story, or even creating a comic strip to retell what they've learned. The key is to give them something to see and then let them show you what they've understood through their own visual creations. Now for the auditory learners, the ones who can memorize a song after hearing it once and thrive in discussions. Their input, it's all about the sounds, thinking of playing audio stories, using songs, or even just having a lively discussion as a way to introduce new language concepts. For output, get them talking, engage them in debates, encourage them to retell what they've heard in their own words, or have them explain a concept to a partner. They need to hear it to get it, and then they need to speak it to make it stick. And let's not forget about the kinesthetic learners, those who need to move, touch, and experience language in a physical way. For these students, sitting still and listening might feel like torture. So how do you balance input and output for them? Start with activities that involve movement, maybe acting on a story, using gestures to reinforce vocabulary, or incorporating games that require physical participation. Then for output, let them build or create something tangible, a model, a role play, or even a hands-on project that demonstrates their understanding. The more they can move, the more they'll absorb and retain. The magic happens when you start to mix and match these approaches, tailoring the input and output balance to meet the diverse needs of your students. Flexibility is your best friend here. Pay attention to how your students respond. Are they engaged? Are they struggling? Use that feedback to tweak your lessons, maybe shifting more towards visual input one day and leaning into auditory output the next. It's all about finding that sweet spot where every student, no matter their learning style, feels like the lesson was made just for them. So if you've ever wondered how to reach all of your students, even when they seem to be learning on completely different wavelengths, the answer is in your ability to adapt. By adjusting the input-output balance based on their learning styles, you're not just teaching a language, you're speaking their language. All right, language champions, that's how you master the perfect balance of input and output for ultimate language success. Wow, Scott, that was so cool. I'm ready to try these tips out right now. That's the spirit, Fizz. And hey, if you're craving even more must-try CI tips, you've got to check out the next video. We've packed it with strategies you won't want to miss. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. Click over there and let's keep the learning fun. Before you go, here's a question for you all. Is there such a thing as too much input in language learning? What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I can't wait to hear what you have to say. Oh, that's a good one. I'm curious to see what everyone thinks. Thanks for watching, everyone. Happy comprehensible input.